And so over the late spring and the summer, when the country became focused on the tragedy of racial injustice that persists in our country, following the brutal killings of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and others, a lot of organizations, a lot of companies scrambled to try to figure out how do they rise to the moment, how do they respond. And the way that we looked at it is, well, there's always more that we can be doing. This was a conversation that was well overdue. And rather than scramble to respond, what Koch did and what Stand Together did was we looked to the long-standing investments that we had to empower people and to take on some of the most pernicious issues of injustice in our society, of institutional injustice, institutional discrimination, head on. And so I'll give you a few examples of those. By no means are they exhaustive. You've seen a more comprehensive collection of these in the work that Steve Lombardo and the team did, and the letter that Charles and Dave sent out soon after the killing of George Floyd. And there are many others that Stand Together and Koch are working on as well. So maybe in discussion, if it's useful, we can get into some more. But just to give you an example of some of the way that we've looked at addressing this very important issue, we've been involved in policing reform now for the better part of a decade. It's a part of the larger portfolio that we have to improve our criminal justice system and to overcome the injustices that exist in the justice system. You guys are very familiar with that because Mark Holden and Koch have been leaders within the Stand Together community to address this issue. Well, as soon as the George Floyd killing came to light, we went to work to kind of get the band back together when it comes to the broad coalition of organizations that were so effective in improving some of the issues in criminal justice over the past decade or so. And so there's a coalition of about 40 groups, and it's a very diverse group, everybody from the ACLU to the American Conservative Union. It involves police organizations and community organizations. We got together and we said, if we stick together, we can make progress even on such a contentious issue. And we issued an agenda for reform, which involved changing police culture, investing in projects like a virtual reality program that Stand Together is helping to develop in partnership with some of the leading VR folks, that allows police officers to put on virtual reality goggles and experience to a certain extent what it means to be a Black man encountering police, as well as trading places and helping members of different communities to put on the goggles and experience what it means to be a police officer asked to help to keep communities safe. That's a project that'll be out the end of next year. We've been investing in probably the very best policing reform project in the country at New York University now for several years. And so drawing on the research coming out of that project, we put out a call to change some of the policies that create bad incentives for police, things like eliminating qualified immunity or other programs that, if you talk to good cops, they say they protect the bad cops, and the police tend to be the greatest advocates for this kind of reform, as well as an agenda that says, hey, let's stop over-criminalizing society. And this is something, again, that we've been working on for a long time. Another call to action that we've been working on is to end the failed drug war. If you talk about institutional discrimination, you can't help but speak about the drug war. It's a tragedy in our country that about 60% of the people who are in prison for drug crimes are people of color. And that's despite the fact that drug use in our country is evenly distributed across races. You can't look at a statistic, a fact like that, and say that's okay. And we believe that there's a much better way to address instances of addiction. And I've talked a little bit about that, I think, last year in some of the programs that we're working on. So a big push there to change the laws to address some of these institutional injustices that have persisted in our society for so long. We're also working on education reform in the name of racial justice. We just hosted an event a couple of weeks ago with the LeBron James Family Foundation with a call to action to stop forcing kids to go to failing schools based on where their parents chose to live. And we think this is a very productive and exciting way to make progress. After all, education is supposed to be the way that people rise up out of any circumstance and if we have an unequal distribution of quality education in our country mandated by law, we make it very difficult for different communities to succeed. So there's a lot of work going on that front. We're also helping to build wealth in communities that have traditionally not had access to the kind of financial capital or the opportunities to build wealth for their families. Another really troubling statistic in our country is that African American families, their wealth is only about, their net worth is only about 20% of the national average. Again, we think there are some pretty pernicious factors that contribute to that. And while there's a lot of things that need to happen, we're investing in groups like Rising Tide Capital, which is a phenomenal organization out of New Jersey that helps to provide access to capital to qualified folks that want to start businesses, but whose qualifications don't match up with what banks often look for. And so really, kind of embracing some of the guiding principles that we have at Koch and at Stand Together to recognize the whole person rather than just sort of checking some boxes based on where they might have gone to school or their past business experience, that sort of thing. The last thing I'll flag is that we're putting all of this portfolio together in a tour across the country that we call Heal America. And this is really under the leadership of one of our longstanding partners, a phenomenal guy out of South Dallas named Bishop Omar Jawar. Omar has led us to many cities already throughout the summer and the early fall, starting in Dallas, going to Chicago, Atlanta, and Minneapolis, with many others on the agenda. And this is an opportunity to bring people together, to have very honest and open conversations about the challenges of racism and the institutional barriers that are holding people back in our country, but really to focus on the solution and ask ourselves, what can each of us do to help make progress towards that North Star of our country? And so that's in addition to the couple of hundred programs that we support in communities to address persistent poverty and other, other challenges in our society that disproportionately affect communities of color. And so there's lots and lots of different opportunities for people to get involved. But the last thing I'll say is, and I've shared this with several of the business leaders throughout Koch, this work is only possible because of the hundreds of partners and supporters that Stand Together has. And there's no greater supporter than Koch Industries and the Koch companies. And so everything that I've just went through and everything else are activities that I hope you guys feel comfortable representing to your teams and your employees as things that you're already helping to support. As I say, if you see an opportunity to get more involved, we'd love to hear from you.